organised by Small Business Saturday. I hope to have a very broad conversation with you over the next 40 minutes or so around how being fantastic at what you do and all the good stuff that you do can help you grow your business and help you with your marketing. What I hope to do is talk about 4 broad subjects. I'm going to start by just giving you some background around the Social Value Act and how that applies to large public sector. And my purpose for doing that, I want you to kind of imagine that my conversation is going to act like a funnel over the next 40 minutes. So I'm going to give you a broad, overarching view of the Social Value Act, and then share some stories with you how big businesses are using the Social Value Act and the good stuff that they do to grow their businesses and improve their bottom line, and then drill that down into, well, how do you as a small business use that, and how do you learn from those, and how do you make your business more appealing to your customers based on the good that you do. And then I'm going to finish up talking a little bit about trading for good and how trading for good brings all of those conversations together, looking at social value, how big businesses are using it, and of course how we can help small businesses to grow. Now, I'm really, really passionate about responsible business practice. I'm really passionate about small businesses. I've travelled around England a lot and I've met some amazing small businesses, and I'm always blown away at how brilliant they are, how hard they work and how much they do over and above the day job that your customers probably never even see. So my objective for the next 40 minutes is I want you all to leave the room as passionate and as inspired about responsible business as I am, and I want everyone to leave the room and think, right, I'm going to do a little bit more around that. So in your heads right now, if you're listening in on Twitter or on Google or in the workshop in the room, set yourselves your own objectives, what you'd like to get out of the next 40 minutes. If I'm not covering everything you want to do, then just shout out and ask me a question and we can change track, because I want you all to leave here feeling that this was a fantastic worthwhile session, and you can take it away and really apply that to your own small businesses. So to start us off is to just talk a little bit about the Social Value Act. I've had a fantastic career working for large businesses in corporate social responsibility. So when Chris White, as a backbench MP, decided to bring forward this thing called the Social Value Act, I was delighted, because it's a brand new way that public sector can look at how they spend their money. And it just gives you the spirit of the Act in a really simple term. It's about how does public sector spend your money as taxpayers that gets a little bit more bang for the buck, and how does your money do more good in society? So if we look at some stories about what that actually means, rather than sort of getting all legalese and looking at the Act. If you've got, as a public sector, your budget to spend, let's look at Croydon. They had a budget to spend on housing to do some refurbishment of their social housing. So that was a tender that they were able to put out for big businesses to tender in to win that work. But when they were looking at that, what the Social Value Act does, it enables Croydon to do some consultation with people who live in those houses to say, what do you want from us as Croydon, and what do you want around your social housing? And lots of ideas came out of that consultation, such as, we'd like to learn about how to make our own homes more energy efficient, we'd like a social space that we could all go to. So it was able to build in some of those ideas into the tenders. So when big businesses wanted to tender for that work, they could put in how they could help Croydon to deliver on some of those social values. So another example would be Wakefield. They wanted to issue a contract for companies to deliver milk into schools, and there's not a lot of differentiation in that. You're either going to deliver milk for a certain amount of price into schools, but the company that won the bid, what they did was said, we'll go into those schools and we'll talk about healthy living, healthy diets, and this is the added value that we will give to Wakefield if we win that contract. So it's about saying, well, we've got a certain amount of money to spend, so how does that translate into big business? So if you look at Oldham Council, they had a banking contract that they wanted to issue. And again, you know, the banks, they're all going to pretty much offer the same service to Oldham to spend that money. But if the bank can go in and say, but we'll come into local schools and we'll talk about debt management, we'll help people stay away from payday loans and understand what that means, that's an added value that public sector money is using. So it's quite interesting to see how big businesses are using that conversation to win their customers and win them their bottom line. Now, I work with some amazing big companies who really get this conversation. So one of those big businesses is Fujitsu. And what they do is they're not a B2C company, they're a B2B. And many of their customers are big public sector authorities. And what they can do is use their responsible business agenda to start to win those contracts, because the public sector needs to have a better ethical conversation. The UK customer is less tolerant now, in fact they're not tolerant really at all, about bad business practice. We've seen the journey over the last few years of where big businesses have got this dramatically wrong, where banks have behaved irresponsibly around lending, where we've got supermarkets behaving irresponsibly in their supply chain around where the food sources have come from. So big businesses are getting a little bit more smart about this. And for me, as being passionate about this subject, this is not about having a corporate social responsibility strategy that's sat over in some other department. This is about the DNA of the big business and how it starts to win your trust as a customer. Because you guys, you've all got a choice where you spend your money. So if you want to buy a coffee on the high street, how much is your buying decision starting to be influenced about where you want to go? So big businesses are really using this to their advantage to talk to their customers. Now, there's all sorts of bigger debates around that. Are they being forced to do it? Social media is really starting to drive their behaviour. But nonetheless, it is a business case that you can have a better conversation with your customers if you present your business as a good business. So I was really interested in this whole Social Value Act and what it's trying to deliver. But the Social Value Act also wants to say, look, big business, look, public sector, you can also reach out to small businesses to deliver some of this work and to social enterprises. So if the NHS is trying to deliver, say, a service on mental health, maybe a charity or a social enterprise who specialises in mental health is in a much better position to deliver it than a big company like Atos or Capita, who might not have that passion about really helping people who are struggling with mental health at that time. So what it's doing is it's enabling the public sector to open up its procurement process to smaller businesses and to social enterprises who are maybe much better placed to deliver all of this because they're in that place where they're coming from passion and because they really believe in being a good business. So you can see how big businesses are really starting to drive this conversation forward around social value. But what I was really intrigued with was how do small businesses do this? Because a small business won't have a CSR department, it won't have a press department, it won't have an army of people. I run a small business and I know that you're still doing your VAT at midnight and making your cups of tea and trying to find a venue to meet people and get onto your next big thing as well as still doing everything else that you've got to do during the day. So when do you have time to do all of this? And the idea for me came out of some focus groups that I was running around small business behaviour and how would you use the Social Value Act to your advantage. And I had a really interesting story. You know when you're in a focus group and there's somebody in the room that's going to really make your focus group difficult? Well, I had one of those sessions. And there was a gentleman in my focus group who was a pharmacist. And he was quite angry at the start of my focus group, saying, look, just down the road are Boots, my nearest neighbour. When they do great things around social responsibility for Macmillan Cancer, every single customer that goes into that pharmacist, into Boots, knows. There's posters in the window, there's point of sale, you can buy a little badge, there's press releases, they can get the local journalist to turn up, there's great news stories in the local press that Boots do amazing things around Macmillan Cancer. And that's fantastic that they do that. But I'm a small pharmacist and I have just raised £3,500 for a children's hospice down the road in my village. How does anybody know that? How am I supposed to tell every single customer that comes into my independent pharmacist that I've just done that? I can't waste money building posters and putting them in my window. I don't want to have that conversation with every single customer. And what was really interesting as we unpacked and explored this was the Britishness of small businesses. And that's the only way I can explain it. Small businesses really don't want to shout about the good that they do. They're quite reserved. They think, well, this isn't great PR. We don't want to be telling people that we've just taken on an apprentice. Who would want to listen? But actually, do you know what? Your customers do want to listen. How many of you go into a restaurant? We're in this amazing building and there's a restaurant upstairs that really promotes the fact it's using local produce. It knows where its foods come from. How much of that starts to resonate with you as a customer that you're interested now to know who it is you're spending your money with? So this idea around how do you as a small business tell your customers what you're doing? And it's really difficult. You don't have a press department. You don't have money to waste on all of this. But this is where social media, Facebook can all start to come into place. That if you've done a cake sale and you've raised some money for your local charities, you can start to tell your customers. And you know what? They really want to know. Last Friday was a breast cancer care awareness day, and I bet every hairdresser in England did something around Pink Friday. And my local hairdressers where I have my hair done is Calypso's in Shaftesbury in Dorset, and I know that they've just raised an enormous amount of money around breast awareness and breast cancer to help women in Dorset. Their customers are interested in that. They start to know that this is a group of women who care about issues that impact on women. So if you've got a choice which hairdressers to go to, why not start to spend your money with that small local business that does great stuff? And it doesn't matter what business you're in. There are so many of our small businesses in Britain who are just amazing. The more I talk to, the more I find out what they're doing. Whether it's taking on apprentices, talking to local schools, none of this has to cost a lot of money. But if you've got some spare time, you can maybe go out and inspire some young people who are at that moment in time when they're starting to make those career decisions. And maybe you can inspire them to be a craft company or go into technology like you're doing. So how do you as a small business start to use that to impact on your bottom line? And I think the UK public is really on a whole journey around this conversation, triggered in part by the bad behaviour of big business, that they're not doing this well. So you as customers, I'm not saying that every customer in Britain behaves like this, but if you imagine the customers in Britain, there'll be some that absolutely get this and they're at the vanguard and they want all, to spend their money ethically. And there'll be a group of customers who never are going to change their behaviour and don't care. But there'll be a big group in the middle. If you nudge them just a little bit in the right direction, yeah, actually, I will spend my money with a more ethical, local business. And that's why I'm really passionate about the work that Small Business Saturday are doing, Shop Local, because if you give customers that choice to go and spend your money in a big supermarket that maybe hasn't paid the living wage, that hasn't taken on apprentices, that doesn't know where its supply chains come from, but with a little bit more effort, do you know what? You can go on your high street, you can go to the grocers and you know where your vegetables have come from, or you can go to the local farm shop. We can really start to nudge the UK's behaviour to shop local where you can. And obviously, people have that shopping choice. And that doesn't mean about not shopping online or going to the bigger businesses, but it's about saying, actually, I will spend my money with a business that pays its tax in the UK. That's important to me because I want my public services to be well funded. So I don't want to spend my money with a company that maybe doesn't pay its tax in the UK if I have an easy choice. So how does a small business take all of this that we know big businesses are playing well to and producing glossy CSR strategies? How do you as a small business with your craft tell people, but actually, do you know what? I might not give a lot, but I give a little bit of money to charity. Every time I spend something, this is who I support. And how do you put that as your marketing message? And sometimes these conversations are easier to have with your customer than a hard sell about your craft and your hobby, because it starts to draw your customer base in that actually you're worth my attention, you're worth me spending money with. And I think, this whole conversation about how do we link that social value conversation, whether it's the public sector putting tenders out, how big businesses are using it, how do I make all of that translate into my marketing strategy? How do I use that on Facebook? How do I tweet out that says, my team were brilliant today, they've just raised £50 through a cake sale for our charity of our choice. These are great engagement stories and you shouldn't be afraid to use them. And it isn't about exploitation or falsifying what you're doing, because I know that you businesses, you do this every single day. The amount of young people that get work experience, it's not all about taking on apprentices. If our young people don't get that first positive touch in the world of work with that 2-week work experience when they're 14 and 15, who is it that does that? It's not the B&Qs and the Marks and Spencers that do all of that. That's our high streets that do that. It's the small businesses. You guys in the room, you're the people that give those people their first positive touch at work. And you might go out and be a speaker for schools and go and talk about, how do you become a woman role model that more women can actually start up their own businesses? Because I don't think our careers officers are very good at this in school. So if we as small business owners can go in and say, do you know what, I earn a good living. I'm my own boss, it's hard work. Sometimes I work 7 days a week, I'm still working at midnight, but you know what, it's great. And this is what I get out of it. So how do we encourage more small businesses to shout about the good that they do? And we've got so many great examples. And where I live locally, there's a fantastic small business called Church Street Joinery that make amazing staircases and window frames and all sorts of things. And I needed a new pair of gates for my garden because my dog kept escaping. And I chose to spend my money with that local joinery because they're passionate about apprentices. And I know that the joint owners of that business constantly go out and talk to the local college.
They sponsor a small award, they give a cup out to the joiner of the year, and they make sure that they take an apprentice every year. That makes a big difference to me and where I want to spend my money. So what I'm interested in, how do we help you as small businesses to do that? And that took me on my journey with Trading for Good. So the story about the pharmacist and how do we do that? I was thinking about that all afternoon, about how would we help you as small businesses to shout about the good that you do. So if I think it's a given that you all do amazing things, how do we get you to shout about that in a way that doesn't cost you any money, doesn't take you a lot of time, because you know, as small businesses, those are the two commodities that you don't have. So we designed Trading for Good as a way to bring all of that conversation together, the Social Value Act, what big businesses are doing and what small businesses need to do. So in designing Trading for Good, what we wanted to do was bring together a very easy digital platform that we knew had to be free at the point of use, that any small business can join and build their profile, but based on the social good that you do. So you can put up what you've done for charity, whether you've recycled, what's important to you. And there are no rules around that. If it's good for your local community, good for your society, good for your staff, good for what you do, then shout about it. I don't want to start putting strong key performance indicators around what you should be, what your carbon footprint should be, because you know what, most small businesses won't know what their carbon footprint is. But we could encourage you to recycle it. We could encourage you to be a bit more responsible about what you do with your packaging when you're selling your own products. I got an exercise mat recently that I bought online, and it came with more packaging than you could shake a stick at. It was in a massive cardboard box, it was wrapped in polythene. I was thinking, is this really necessary when it's an unbreakable item that's in there? So I think that there's some challenges that small businesses can really do better. So Trading for Good was about saying, join in with this growing network and shout about the good that you do. And what we'll do in return is shout about you. We'll promote you on Twitter, we'll help promote your profile, you'll be able to start networking with others. But then what we realised we were creating was a channel for small businesses to sell into the supply chains of bigger businesses. It's not that easy for small businesses to break into that procurement process for bigger businesses. And yet, big businesses I talk to want to do that. They want to work with small businesses in their supply chain, but they're not quite sure how to connect the two. So if I give you Fujitsu as an example, it was bidding in for a really large IT contract into a local authority. That local authority had had a conversation with itself about social value. And it had said, what we need to do is to promote more small businesses in IT in our area. And so what Fujitsu looked at in order to win that bid was, how would we do that? How would we get more small IT suppliers in our own supply chain that can help us deliver that contract? And that's a really interesting dynamic that they're starting to explore. So if you've got, as a small business, something that you think you could sell your crafts into a hotel chain to sell to their customers, how would you do that without jumping through hoops, procurement rules, preferred bidders, and all of that stuff? How do we get big business to say, you can work really smart with small businesses in your supply chain? So if you're a supermarket working with local farmers, so Waitrose, they're doing this really well. So if you look at what they're doing in their supply chain, saying that they buy British food from British farmers and they know where everything's sourced from, some of those farmers might be really, real small producers, but they're able now to get into a procurement supply chain because that big business is starting to recognise, actually, there's a great conversation here. These small businesses are more likely to be ethical, they're more likely to employ local people, they're more likely to know where their goods are coming from. So how do we engage all of that in our conversation? So that led Trading for Good on another journey, and this is all about you identifying how your business can start to meet a demand that's out there. So Trading for Good started to work with some of these big suppliers, and Fujitsu was one of our first clients who were prepared to take a punt on a new idea, so all credit to them, and we've worked with Carillion and a few others now. And we've been pushing our data capture, our simple membership process down the supply chain. And what we can then do is measure what's going on. So when you join Trading for Good, you tell us a few things. It's really simple. We don't ask mega questions, but we just ask you, do you take on, do you do volunteering? How much have you fundraised this year? Do you do pro bono hours? Have you recycled? But if you tell us that, we're starting to gather information. And that information is starting to tell us an amazing story about what's going on. So if Fujitsu do that or Carillion do it for their supply chain, it starts to build a story of all the different social good and all the fantastic things that's going on in their supply chain by working with small businesses. And if they spend their money with small businesses, it means that more good is then going down the line and helping them to do that. So the data that Trading for Good is starting to gather is really quite fascinating. So imagine if we could do that for a geographical area. We launched Trading for Good in 4 pilot areas, and one of those areas is Ipswich. So we chose Ipswich for a very specific reason. There are not many big businesses in Ipswich. It's a very geographical, big spread area, and a lot of it's rural. And although people perceive it to be a wealthy area of Britain, there's actually some massive areas of deprivation. So how do we work with an area that's difficult? So we've got an amazing business in Ipswich called Ipswich Waterfront, and they are now the Trading for Good champion for that area. And they're working with their small businesses to work out what's going on. But imagine if we could tell the authorities in Ipswich all of the great stuff that's going on by collectively measuring the behaviour of their small businesses. We'll be able to give some really big trend data that's going on. So are small businesses taking on apprentices really? Are they recycling? So if for example, Ipswich has set itself a target to have 0 waste to landfill by, say, 2020, if its small businesses are actually not doing that, it starts to give information back to the decision makers that they need to encourage their small businesses to do more in that area. So Trading for Good is starting to bring that conversation together about social value, how it can help big authorities that need to procure in a more socially responsible way. It's starting to work with big business to understand what's going on in their supply chain, but ultimately it's all about shouting about the good that small businesses do. Now, big businesses for a long time, they've got this conversation. They've got that if they have a great social responsibility strategy, it really starts to drive employee engagement. Now, you might be a one-man band, but equally you might employ a few people. So, you know, how do you keep everyone really on song, that you don't develop that talent that then wants to leave? How do you make your business a great place to work? And by doing all of this community engagement, making people feel that they belong to a really responsible part of the community, that they're helping young people, they're helping a local charity, it all starts to build that brand awareness. And of course, those employees become great ambassadors for you. They go out talking to their friends and family saying, wow, we've just done a parachute jump and raise this money for charity, or we're doing the moonwalk to raise money for breast cancer care. So all of this stuff that big businesses have to put massive organisations behind and bring in charities of the year and have these big structured programmes, you as a small business are in an amazing place to capitalise on this. You can have great fun at work, you can inject a real sense of responsibility, but more importantly, this is a story that your customers will want to hear. So if you're doing great things, we say at Trading for Good, please don't be so British. You know, shout out of all the amazing things that you do. So get on Twitter, get on Facebook, use the social media that doesn't cost you a lot, just a little bit of time, and share all the amazing things that you do. Because you know what, people do care. They care that you've bothered to take on a young person for work experience. They care that you're taking on an apprentice. It matters to them that you're recycling. It matters to them that you're a part of their high street and their community. And that's why we want to get that message out and remind the great British public to shop local, to come on Shop Saturday, to go, you know, to use those local businesses. Because every single corporate I work with, it seems to me that all their growth strategies are predicated on working with small businesses, whether it's the big IT companies wanting you to sell your cloud, or, you know, whatever it is. All the banks, they're desperate for your business. They want small businesses to be involved with them. But why should a small business bank and give money to a bigger bank that's not behaving responsibly? Why don't you then start to choose a bank where you can say, I'm proud to be a customer, in the same way that your customers are proud to connect into you? So I'm really interested in finding out more about what small businesses are doing in the area of good, how we shout about it, and how we start to build those profiles. And I genuinely believe that, you know, small businesses are utterly brilliant. You do an amazing amount for our communities. I don't think there'd be a carnival in the land takes place if the local high street and the local businesses didn't sponsor it in some way. What about all the local charities that knock on your door and say, can I put my cash battle tin on your reception or your shop counter for the next month to raise money for me? What would happen if every small business decided tomorrow morning to stop doing all that? If every small business in the land said, we're done, we're not taking on any more young people, we're not having any more local support for charities, what would that do to our social economy? And yet it's always the big corporates that get the credit. It's always big high street brands and their charity of the year that ends up in the newspapers. And yet it isn't that. That's not where the bulk of the social value comes from. I genuinely believe it comes from amazing small businesses that everybody knows. So I'm really interested to hear what people's experiences are, whether you think that what you do, you can add value to, and how you get that to grow your own business, and how do you put that into your marketing messages. And actually, why don't you make that your top marketing message, and then pull people in to what you actually do? Because some of the smart big businesses, that's what they're doing. So if you look at Marks and Spencer's last year, it wasn't all about the clothes and the food that they sold. They spent more money advertising shopping and their partnership with Oxfam, and using Joanna Lumley as their face for the good that they do, because what they're doing is they're reinforcing their brand message to you as their customers. Come do business with us, spend your money with us, because we're a good business that we want your custom. So why can't you translate that into you being your small business and your marketing message? Because it's easy to do, it won't cost you anything, and I bet you're already doing it. Now, when we go around the country talking to some small businesses, they'll say, oh, but we don't really do a lot. And then when you start talking to them, they do a phenomenal amount, but they hadn't thought that should be a marketing message for them. So in terms of trading for good and shouting about it, I genuinely, absolutely believe that our small business is utterly brilliant. And if you make an effort to tell your customers what you do, you will start to push your brand out there. Because you know what, rogue traders, they won't be doing that. Rogue traders who are trying to scam money out of people, they won't be taking on apprentices. They won't have a message about recycling. They won't be able to get endorsements from a local charity. But if you give them money to a local charity and you've got that charity to endorse your message back, what's that saying about your brand? It's positioning your brand in such a powerful way with that local market that you can start to say, I'm a good small business and I absolutely deserve your custom, your attention, your repeat business, because I'm an integral part of your community. So, you know, whether you're a hairdresser or a joiners or a craftsy or a young IT company, this is all about saying, how can we galvanise the good that we do? And what I'm interested in at Trading for Good is then measuring all of that good. And we're going to start to work hopefully with some universities and some Association of British Business Schools to get more and more members, so that we can really start to measure and report on all the amazing stuff that's going on. So when the Chancellor at the end of the year says there are 4.3 million businesses in the UK that account for 98% of our turnover, I want to go, and they've accounted for this amount of money into the charity sector. They've created this amount of young work opportunities. They've taken on these amount of apprentices. This is all the amazing stuff our British businesses do that nobody ever gets to hear, because they don't put a press release out, because they don't have a CSR report that's online in a nice PDF version. And what we want to be able to do is really start to bring those conversations together. The small business connecting into the bigger business supply chains, connecting into public service, and then connecting back down into your customer base if you're a B2C customer. So that was kind of what I wanted to share with people, that sort of top line social value act, how big businesses are smart, they're really turning on to that conversation. But actually as a small business, if you look to that, how can you draw lessons for your business, and how can you turn that into a very powerful, honest and genuine marketing message, so you're not trying to big up your product or what you do, you're just saying, this is who we are. This is the responsible business approach that we take, and we're part of this growing community. And so developing that conversation, I think, is a really powerful way of marketing your business. Now I think you can drive customers to your site, how you can enhance your brand reputation, and how you can build a really strong, sustainable brand. And I'll just share with you a couple of case studies on Trading for Good, and then I'd be interested to sort of get your feedback and any questions. We've got some great examples on Trading for Good. We've got a company that we've recently written a case study on called Apex Radio, and they sell two-way radios. They've been going 24 years. Now, as a small business, that's some tough going to keep your business going all that long time. But they really have great charity events. I think they employ about 22 people. They're constantly doing fun days and charity days and getting their staff involved, and they're constantly taking on apprentices and involving young people in what they do. And it keeps their conversation as a business alive in a marketplace that's tough. Ipswich Waterfront that are now our champions down in Ipswich, you know, what they've done to help charities and put local money into local charities rather than big charities, it's phenomenal. And there are so many local good causes that, you know, they're competing in a space that's really hard to get people to give to, because they always want to give to the big charity brand names. But if a small local business is actually, we're going to support that local charity down the road, you start to get some really powerful local conversations. And it's a great story to engage your local press with. Because journalists, you know what? They want a story to land on their desk. Complete with photos, complete with that soundbite. So make it easy for them and say, hey, we've just had a cake sale today, we made a load of buns, and here's some photographs, and this is the money we've raised, and here's the local charity that's going to benefit from that local engagement. Then use that as an amazing way to put your marketing strategy together at very low cost in a very powerful way that will engage your local journalists, that will give great content to the local readers. So I'm trying to get together this message around trading for good, that if you trade for good, it actually starts to increase your brand reputation. So that's kind of my top line conversation. So I don't know if anyone's got any comments or they want to chip in with what they're doing. And we can't go quiet because we're on YouTube and Google, so everyone has to talk in as well.
Okay, well, okay, hi, my name's Joanne, Joanne Mitchell. I'm representing Empire Blush, and my company is quite diverse in what it does. So I initially started out probably about 8 years ago now, and initially I was doing mobile services and providing mobile beauty services, and that quickly grew into wanting to take that into kind of the salon environment. And so I joined the local, I want to say local, but it's quite a big brand gym and franchise, we'll just leave it at that. And I set up home within their home, which worked for a while. I quickly realised that it would actually stifle my own brand and development. So after about 2 years, I moved on, and very fortunately with the support of my loyal customers, moved on and decided to kind of take a step outside into the big world with their high street shops, and took up premises within a building, which worked for about a year, but then unfortunately had to let that building go, had some problems with the landlord. And to cut a long story short, I needed to grow again, so I was fortunate in having another building fall into my hands, and from that I was able to develop. So it went from beauty to then going into teaching. And that's really where it really took off for me. So I developed a training school, and from that training school, initially it was about supporting those that wanted to get into the industry. But it quickly grew when I realised I actually wanted to support people that were at a disadvantage. So I started developing partnerships and started working with people that were supporting people that were unemployed, and started delivering on MVQs, and that led to me working with key providers like Your Centre Plus and other organisations to support those that were going through, I call it the hardship, some temporary, some longer term. But essentially what I realised there was a real kind of need, kind of niche in the market to support people, not with just developing the skill set to acquire a career, but more importantly looking at confidence and motivation, and those are the things that kind of underpin who we are as individuals in terms of our values. And I realised I wanted to do more. I found it quite a difficult process just because you talk about procurement. Procurement is such a large area, and quite often it's very much left to the big boys. So when I would knock on the doors to work with the colleges, I thought, oh, they'd love working with me because I stand for everything that they stand for. But what I actually realised that it wasn't the case, and quite often they see me as a threat. And I was quickly told that, you know, because of the sector that I was working in, they're already delivering in that sector, so they wouldn't really want to work with me. People that try to support are giving names and contacts, and you send all the emails, and you realise quite quickly that a lot of those people buffer you. So I decided that, okay, what can I do? You know, when one door closes, you open another, and quite often if it won't open one way, you get another opportunity to open another. So I decided to develop my own social arm and take it one step further. So I've recently developed my social enterprise, and that really is geared about, it's still the same training delivery that I do, and working with people all over who want to develop their career, or want to develop another aspect within the beauty industry. But this is just geared around people that are unemployed and are on no income. And so at this moment in time, it's really about raising funds for that and raising awareness. And so it's a very new venture for me. It's everything that I stand and believe in. I've designed a whole concept about, I've created a pie, and the pie is that you take different segments. So you decide on what is the specialism that you'd like to develop, or what would be your ideal career. And we obviously deliver for that actual MBQ for that particular. So if you want to become a facialist, then you do a course on MBQs in providing facials. If you want to become a nail technician, it would be around the nails and so forth. But then in addition to that, we will do another piece, which would be deciding actually, do you want to be self-employed, because it's not for everybody, or do you actually want to work for somebody? So again, developing workshops that support that, and then taking it one step further and adding in the mentoring. So I'm literally wanting people to come on board and celebrate my dream and ambition to support those that find themselves in a bit of a sticky situation, because it often can be a cycle, and move forward. And for that, I'm just needing a bit of support, whether it's a bit of funding, but more importantly, I suppose it's marketing and pushing that forward, because I've got so many people who want to do those courses, and so many people that I believe I can help, and we've helped a lot of people over the years, and I just think there's room to grow. We all have a place in society, but I really feel really conscious about the fact that, it's about giving back.
And how would you use that then to encourage people to join your business based on, who would you sell to and use your funding based on your story?
Okay, so at the moment, one of the interests I have is JCP, Job Centre Plus. But again, for them, you do have to be not-for-profit, and obviously it's quite sensitive in the way that you obviously write a bid for them in numbers, etc. And so that's important to me. But working with other organisations that tap into the same market that I tap into, because a lot of people come to us directly who want to do courses because they want to develop their career or their business, but looking at other either social enterprises or also social housing groups, and that also have a social agenda in working with people to get them, starting their careers.
And have you found that using this story has helped your marketing?
I've only just started it, so I'm literally having a conversation today here live, like you do. So yeah, I'm starting my conversation today. So if anybody wants to join me, I'll be swearing pink, but at some point this week, anybody who knows me knows I love pink. So I'll be there wearing my pink on fire, pink lipstick, pink nail varnish, pink anything that goes. I'll be there. So just come and join me. But yeah, I always work with like-minded people. I support the apprenticeship delivery. And it's something that I really believe strongly in, young people is where it starts from. And, we have a responsibility. It does start within the home, and then it's extended within the education sector. And from then, we have to build it in along all sectors. And I very much believe in big communities, big societies. A family is not just within the home, a family is everything around it, and just having continuity. So anybody that believes in what I believe in, come and join me on my very pink day, my very own special pink day.
And what about anybody else? Has anybody else got any experiences of how they've used what the good that they do to try and grow their business?
I've definitely tried, but doors have shut so far. So Francesca from Crafty Revolution. So basically, my charitable side is I make applique airplane t-shirts, and £2 for a shirt go to the Royal British Legion. So with that in mind, I have approached other kind of military kind of associations and companies, but I think they've seen it more as a threat, and suddenly said we're going to do something on our end and won't take it further. So it's kind of that. I think this is very interesting and very useful to probably help that a bit more, and as you say, get that connection with the bigger organisations and that help towards it. So, but it's just very early days at the moment. But you're right. I have been a bit reserved about it. It is shouted out. So I have raised money for it, mainly through Armed Forces Day, and selling those t-shirts on that day, which have been successful. So it's shouting out a bit more, I think.
Okay.
How would you suggest getting over some of that negative feedback?
I think really measuring it and giving some big shout outs of the figures. So
Yes.
this is the amount of money I've given over, and don't be reserved about it. You know,
Right.
this is what you do. You're not fabricating it. You can evidence it and say, I've created these amount of t-shirts and this is what I've sold,
Yes.
and keep pushing that social message. And then when you're trying to go to those big businesses, you need to position yourself more in sort of a partnership term that you're helping that wider society
Right.
good.
Yes.
And they can't argue with your good message.
Right.
And you just have to keep on and presenting it in a strong and structured way.
Okay.
And so join Trading for Good, get your
Yes.
profile built,
Yeah,
and
definitely.
we'll help you.
Yes, Rosalind Scott from Mobicycle. I mean, we're still basically a micro company. I have a team and a board, but they're virtual. So, so although we don't have cash to give, the social and environmental impact is written into our articles of memorandum. And the waste we collect is ring-fenced for local youth unemployment, as well as peace initiatives in the Congo. And we hope to build a recycling center in Ghana because Agbogbloshie has the world's largest electronic waste dumping ground. So non-monetary, I suppose, impact has been, I've attended hackathons, and over the last 3 weeks, I won a hackathon sponsored by International Alert. They're a very large charity, also works in the Congo. And so we built an app called Supply Peace, which tries to inject sustainability and responsibility into global supply chains. 2 weekends ago, I was at Skype, and we built an app called Climate API, which aggregates all the climate change APIs, application programming interfaces. And we also created an API around behavior change for sustainability. And then this past weekend, we were at TechCrunch, which I think had 750 developers register. And we hacked on for the Ministry of Justice because so our app was called Victim Assist, which will basically be an app, a web application, so that any victim of crime in the UK doesn't have to memorize a bunch of reference numbers, crime reference numbers. They just have to have one. They type it into the system, and they can see a crime timeline to understand what happened with their case, as opposed to calling their local. And it also has you can use your phone to lodge the crime through it directs you to the local constable's online crime reporting tool. And that will be apparently posted on the Ministry of Justice's blog to let them know, to talk about what they achieved from the hackathon. So in terms of working with large businesses, that has been quite hard. I was just at the climate change event with large retailers. Marks and Spencer's was there, only 30 people in the room. So, but even still, just trying to network with them, I think often, to be fair to them, I think the concern they have is that for a micro or small business, they wonder, okay, can this business handle, working with all of our stores, and will this business even be around 9 months from now? Luckily, I've been going now for almost 3 years, so they know I'm not going away. But what worked for me is I went to an awards conference for charities, and I started talking to very small charities. So we are launching a pilot in Manchester, and essentially the youth will collect the waste, and they're going to survey the local people, and ASDA will provide the location for our containers. And so that has been quite good because I'm working with the director of the charity, so I'm able to, sort of get through quite easily. And we both just share the same passion for unemployment. So because I did try to go to the larger training providers, and I thought, okay, I'm willing to offer positions, and given the difficulty they have in meeting their quotas, you would think it would be a no-brainer. But for whatever reason, bureaucracy, red tape, it just didn't happen. So now I just try to look for charities, smaller charities, and partner that way. But one thing I will say that does kind of bother me is with the Social Value Act, Big Society said, well, it'll be so much easier for small businesses. When you go into this contract, say Contracts Finder, and if you check the box for, say, I'm a social enterprise, and you do a search, you should get contracts that are sort of earmarked for small businesses. And the number of opportunities for social enterprises and small social enterprises, because obviously I can't bid for a £2 million contract. Even when you do run that search, you just don't get there are very few opportunities. Because unless your revenue is, say, I think generally speaking, and you can correct me, the size of the contract for which you bid cannot be more than, say, 3 to 4 times your current annual revenue. So because many of the contracts that are posted are in the millions of pounds, it's very difficult for us to even get past that first hurdle. So one tip that I was told was to go for framework agreements, because with framework agreements, and again, maybe I'm wrong, they can be as little as £50,000, or even I think sometimes even £5,000. So as a small micro business, you qualify for a framework agreement and then gradually grow your business that way. And I've run into people who did that back in the 80s. They worked with their local authority through very small contracts, and now they're set, or they're going concerns. So that's been something it's on my list to look into a bit more. But generally speaking, I guess it's just about getting your name out there.
Could you, so I was going to ask, can you do it as part, because I know one of the things that certainly for me when I've been looking at procurement, or one of the things I've been involved in is a lot, especially even with JCP, is the whole thing about partnership working. So maybe going as a consortium and kind of partnering with another enterprise or another small business that has the same values, and looking at what it is you can kind of share your delivery on.
Yes.
Is that something that you put out?
Yes, and even on the Contracts Finder, some of those, like the Fujitsus or the large companies, they can very easily sort of add us as subcontractors.
That's a good route in, though, is to work with some of these big businesses that want to work with small, responsible businesses. And if you make a direct approach to the local authorities, they often have programs to work with SMEs that's not necessarily on big Contracts Finder. So I think it's about using your social value message to find a different route into some of the local authorities and the bigger businesses, because most of them will have a small business officer or somebody whose responsibility this is. So it's about how do you use your social value message to help you open those doors.
Do you have any advice for small businesses wanting to get past the barriers with the big businesses? So you mentioned Asda there, to try and build those relationships.
I think most of these businesses now, they're starting to really focus on this, so now's a great time to get involved in that conversation. I would first of all try and find out if they have within their procurement team somebody who's responsible for small businesses. The majority of the big businesses that I know do have a person sat in their procurement teams who this is their focus. So they are responsible for understanding how do they get more small businesses into their supply chain. And it's a tough area, it's a tough question to answer. I mean, government set a target that it was going to work with a greater percentage of smaller businesses, and it's failing on its own targets because it's not an easy thing to do. As you said, that they want to make sure, how do they minimise the risk? What part of that risk taking do they have to do, especially if they're spending public money? But I would use your conversation that you're a good business, that you're a responsible business, this is the social value that you add, and try and get your conversation so that you become on the radar of those big businesses before you just start bidding in for contracts and for work. So how do you engage them on Twitter? How do you post on their Facebook page that you're a good business? How do you become their attention? Can you go to a networking event where they're going to be at? Can you produce your marketing literature based on the good you do and send it into them so you get that story going, so that when you come to bid for work, you start to become a bit more of a known entity, that you're not going to go away, that actually what you do has got social added value, that you are a diverse business, that you are going to help young people. And actually, if you're saying those things, you need to start to walk the talk now, and you need to start to deliver on that. And I can be one of that 5% of SMEs that you now start to work with. So I would constantly get your conversation in there and find different ways to circumvent the main route. And I'd get your conversation at networking events and on social media and through direct literature and by engaging them directly, asking if they can spare you 10 minutes for a quick coffee meeting, and get your name on their table so that you can start to build your story.
We've got a few questions on Twitter that we could ask, if that's okay. Seeing Sticks asks, as a micro business, I wondered if I should collaborate with other local businesses to create more social value impact.
What a great question. Definitely, and you're starting to see this now with high streets coming together. People in business in the community has got a big project running on how high streets can add more value, and now the local shops can talk about what they're doing for their local high street to keep it vibrant. So if a shop has closed, rather than having an empty shop on the high street, can we have some pop-up shops? How can we use that space? How can we keep it vibrant? So when people come onto the high street, they don't have a quiet shopping experience, they have something that adds more value to them. So if you're in an area and the opportunity provides, then yes, certainly if you can collaborate to help a local charity. And you'll find small businesses do this. I know that in my high street, everyone collaborates around the carnival, around a local fair that takes place, organising food crafts, so they collaborate to close the high street for the day so that they can have a food craft, because it still draws more customers into the high street, which then walk into their shops, even though they might have come for the food fair. So I think collaboration is a fantastic way to grow your social value and be part of that bigger conversation, because at the end of the day, it's all part of putting your brand into that bigger conversation, and anything that gets your brand noticed with customers is fantastic.
Great, thank you. We've got a question from Astute Marketers. Who says, how many social platforms do you recommend businesses to be active across?
Well, it really depends where your customers go to, doesn't it? You have to understand where your customers want to engage in your conversation. I run another small business called the Really Useful Stuff Company, and Really Useful Stuff sells really useful stuff, surprisingly, for disabled and older people. So we try to find great entrepreneurs who have invented all sorts of things that just make daily living made a little bit easier. And we use Twitter a lot. We have a shout out every Friday on a hashtag hour called Invented It, where we get people to shout out, I wish somebody had invented something because I've got this need, or hey, I have invented that, and then we try and bring small suppliers together on a platform. Because as a small supplier, as you well know, if you've invented something, it's really hard to take it to the UK market when your market's the entire population of Britain. A great example, there's a lady called Catherine. She broke her leg badly and she was on crutches for a while, and she was really struggling to carry her iPad, her notebag, her cup of coffee whilst being on a set of crutches. So being an inventive kind of lady, she invented a kind of a really snazzy apron, purposely designed to get your iPad in, to get your notepad in, to put your coffee cup in and everything. She called it the Hopper. And she's had it made in Britain, she had it designed, and she produces it in Wrexham. But how does she take that to market? How does she get the whole of Britain to know that if you're on crutches for that week, hey, buy my product because it's great for you? So we're taking her product to market through our social enterprise, through our not-for-profit called Really Useful Stuff. So we're a dropship marketing. Anyone can sell on us, and if your product is easy to use, does not have to have been designed for a disabled person, but it's just easier to use and it has a little bit of social benefit, then we can take that to market. So for me, Twitter works really well because I can engage in conversation, and Facebook works really well. So I tend to use the social avenue where I know my customers come. So I tap into other networks. So I'm looking for networks of disabled people, networks of carers, networks of caregivers and older people. So I go to where I think my customers will be rather than expect my customers to come to where I want to be. So it's about really understanding your target audience, about really taking your conversation to where they already are talking, where they already network, whether it's going out to coffee shops. It might be an offline conversation if you are a really locally based business. I mean, for example, if you're a restaurant, you know, Facebook and Twitter are great for maybe interacting people who might be going on holiday to your area. But if you're a static business, you would want to have that conversation in that local area. So it might be talking to, you know, local church groups or local morning groups, or where mums might network, or whatever your target audience, that's where you need to take your business conversation.
Great, thank you. We've got a question from Ovens & Co. Who says, we work with Kids Company around the year, and apart from trading for good, what's the best way to tell our community about this?
Well, again, I think you really need to try, well, who are your target audience and how do you want to get your message out? I mean, Kids Company is such a great brand. You know, most people in London will know Kids Company, so how can you use their followers to get your message out? And if they've got a huge network of following, and they have got quite a lot of celebrity engagement, so how would you get them to endorse your business? Going through that social media message, whether they're retweeting you and things that they can do easily. So definitely to use that conversation about all the amazing stuff you've done for Kids Company and get them to retweet you and their followers to retweet you, because that's what you want, isn't it? You want their networks to support what you're doing. So it's not just about tapping straight out, it's about then expanding it out to touch more and more people. And also it's important to remember that not everyone will react instantly to that conversation, but they'll log it somewhere in their mind and go, I remember there was a great restaurant down the road that did this, or they've helped Kids Company in that way. So I would definitely take your message to where their networks are more likely to engage with you.
Brilliant, thank you. I think we've got a question from Aldermore Bank, who asked, how can small businesses and big business work together on community projects?
Oh, I think this is my favourite subject. I think there's an enormous amount that big business and small business can do. I work with quite a lot of big businesses on their Charity of the Year partnerships or on their social responsibility charities. And I'm always getting them to organise events like Meet the Buyer events. So I'm always encouraging the big business clients to organise a whole range of seminars to meet the buyer, but not just about what you do. So if it's Fujitsu and they're not just having a meet the buyer about how you sell more IT in, but how do you work smart with charities? How do you take on more apprentices? One of the great things that came out of when Fujitsu was working with Trading for Good was many of their small businesses in their supply chain do lots for young people, but didn't quite make on the leap to take on an apprentice. But Fujitsu's got a fantastic apprenticeship scheme. It takes on 200 apprentices a year. So how can Fujitsu help with some of the paperwork, help with some of finding the trading providers, and how can it start to work more smart with those smaller businesses? I think this is a fascinating area. I think it's one that's growing. I think big businesses are now waking up to the fact that there's innovation, there's agility, there's flexibility. They bring some of these young social enterprises to keep that innovation coming through their own pipeline. If big businesses are holding a big event for their charity partnership, why not invite some of their small suppliers to come and get engaged in that, because it helps them inspire their own employees, get engaged with an employee engagement conversation, without having to organise the event and do, you know, the sleep out or bike night or whatever it is the charity's doing. I think, you know, this idea of smaller businesses piggybacking on what big businesses are doing is a great way to have your first taster of social, and it's a great networking way. You know, if you're a small business and you want to network with these big people, go to some of their charity events, go to some of their social events. It's a great conversation starter to have with these people. So I think that's an area that all big businesses and small businesses should. How do you collaborate more?
Great, thank you. Any more questions?
I actually have two uncomfortable questions. Oh. Not too uncomfortable. Okay, so first of all, my name is Michele and I'm from Network. We are a startup, one of the 500,000 startups that registered last year. So a few weeks ago, I had a conversation with the other two co-founders, and we said we really want to have a stronger corporate social responsibility, but how do we decide how we're going to do it? So, you know, the 1,000 things that we could do, that could be, you know, from recycling to taking on an apprentice, to give some money to charity, to help projects in the local community, whatever it is. How is that a checklist that we could go through? Is there any suggestion, any framework that we could follow to choose where what we could do in terms of corporate social responsibility? And if we were to choose some of the charities, how do we know that our money is actually used in a way that is good for the economy and society in general? So that was actually the first question.
Okay.
And the second one is, we felt that trades associations and business associations in general have kind of gone through some sort of a crisis. So they used to be very useful for small businesses because effectively they would give you some money back for their annual fees. But currently we see that a lot of them are not really bringing that much value back. And that is in terms of guidance on how to customer social responsibility on, in our case, for example, is because the objective of my company is to bring all businesses online in terms of giving them an online presence. And you talk to these people, and a lot of the times they say that's not something that we do. We don't work as a middleman between you and the actual associated businesses. It's what are you here for that? So how do you see that? Okay.
Your first question then about is there a checklist? I would absolutely advise against a checklist.
Yeah.
I would go back to your core business. What's your mission? Why do you exist? And try and find a more natural fit, whether it's about driving employee engagement. So, I'm taking a wild guess, but if you're working about bringing businesses online, what about all the excluded people? Helping older people to get online. It's a big space, all this digital online, digital exclusion, and there might be a small project that you get engaged with, but it's about having a project that actually starts to have resonance with your business. Whether it's about helping the staff to feel more engaged, whether it's about putting your brand presence out there. And so I would try and find a way that really naturally fits. Go and talk to some of your stakeholders. Focus groups are a great way of generating new ideas and being innovative about it. Have a brainstorming session, have a look what's going on in your local area. Are you UK-wide, European-wide? Do you want to have a brand in a particular area? All of those things need to come into play about where you want that strength of your conversation to be. So it has to fit. I think people have to see that there's a common sense relationship between what you're aiming to do and the impact that you want to have. I might focus more about your impact. You were talking about, does the charity spend its money in a way that you want to do that? You don't have to work with a formal charity route. You can start to have social impact yourself if you're really concerned about those areas. Nearly every charity will have transparency on its books and how it spends its money. So I wouldn't be concerned about having, a worry about how your money is going to be translated, but I would focus more on what's the impact that you'd like your business to be known for, and where's the biggest difference that you think you can take some of those challenges. And if your world's about digital and online, there are so many challenges that you could look at. So I guess it's just brainstorming each one down, really starting to unpack what's the impact that you want to be known for. And if you work with a project, does it have that impact? So is it about older people and exclusion? Is it about small startups not having the capacity to get online because of broadband and rural issues? Are they just too busy to get online? Is it about running workshops? So I would really focus on the impact that you want to have. And in terms of the second question around what memberships are doing, I've found membership organisations really powerful in the past to network with. I think it's about having that conversation. They will get precious about their membership because their monetisation, their funding mechanism is getting members to pay them. So they're very precious about who they will give their membership to. But maybe be more innovative about how you get your story so that you become their member because you want them to tell your story. So, the Institute of Directors, they've got a great regional network, they've got regional magazines as well as their National Director magazine. So if you're a member yourself, how can you get them to promote your story? The best way to use them is to tap into their existing networks. The FSB has some fantastic regional networking events. You need to put the shoe leather in and go to their networking events and network for yourself at the events that they let them do the hard work, let them organise the event and get the guest list together, and then you decide whether there's a good guest list there and you want to go and network. Try and get the guest list in advance and use it that way and spiral it out from there. But use social media. So if you look at the FSB or the Chambers of Commerce or the IOD, all their members will follow them. So try and tap into any hashtag conversations that they've got going on or go to their events. They won't give you their membership list, nor will they sell their wares. And look at it from the other point of view. If you're a member of the IOD, you don't want to be bombarded with everyone trying to say everything from insurance to how to get online to how to get more women into business. They would literally have thousands of messages going down to every small business. And we know one of the things small businesses hate is to have the constant emails constantly being sold out. Small businesses like to pull information down. So if you realise that about a small business, that they don't want to be pushed and bombarded, but they want to know where the information is, so when they're ready, they can tap into it and go, I've got time now today, I'd like to have a look at how I get online. How do you make sure that you're easy to find, that your information is readily available? So I would try and get the membership organisations to respect you as a great small business and want to run a story on you, so that they have their story in one of their membership magazines, or they can find you online. But then you have to go and tap into their networking events. That's how it works. It doesn't work the other way around.
Okay, very much.
Okay. Yeah, well, if there's no more questions, I'm very happy to take questions later on Twitter, either through Small Business Saturday or through Trading for Good directly. I am incredibly passionate about the subject. I think as small businesses, you do an amazing amount for our economy that often goes hidden. I think you are our unsung heroes. Don't stop doing what you're doing. I think you're fantastic. Keep on taking those young people, keep on challenging. It is tough out there. It isn't easy to run your own business. It can be the most frustrating things at times, but it can also be the most rewarding to know that you're part of this great entrepreneurship that's growing in the United Kingdom. And what a trend. It's amazing to see the resurgence of small businesses and giving big businesses a run for their money. So my advice, carry on doing what you're doing. You're fantastic at it. Don't give up. Keep shouting about it. And if ever you have a dark day and it's not quite going real well, turn to a friend for some advice, because you know what? There's loads of small businesses out there, and your peer group, other small businesses, are the best people to give you advice. Thank you.
Thank you.